knowledge experts in fields like Islamic banking, finance, among others. So today, with me, I have an expert in technology, and our topical discussion will be science and technology in Islam. When you hear the term science and technology in Islam, what comes to your mind? Is it just WhatsApp, Facebook, YouTube? Is it biology, chemistry, among others? So allow me invite our expert, student of knowledge, Sekalema Hamza, lecturer of computer science at the Islamic University in Uganda, and Dawa worker with different entities. Brother Sekalema, you're most welcome.
Now, our viewers, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I thank you all for putting in the time to watch this particular program, and we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the benefit that is intended out of this, because we know very well that innamal a'malu binniyat. So whatever you intend, for as long as you are focused, it becomes what you'll possibly benefit out of it. Because when the Prophet was explaining that hadith, he gives some examples. Man kanat hijratuhu ila Allahi wa rasulihi fa hijratuhu ila Allahi wa rasulihi, up to the end of the hadith. Now today our focus is on science and technology and its relationship with Islam. So we're not necessarily looking at only how it plays into our religion, but we are looking at our history regarding this issue of science and technology. Now a person may ask themselves and wonder why do we even need to even discuss science and technology in a program that is called Al-Hidayah. Primarily we are talking of Islamic guidance.
Yes, please.
Now, first of all, science and technology is a knowledge domain. The searching for knowledge is an open area for the Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ has instructed us, searching for knowledge, talab al-ilm faridatan ala kulli muslim wa muslima. So meaning, for as long as you're a Muslim, for as long as you're a Muslimah, it becomes incumbent upon you that you search for knowledge. Okay. You can search for any kind of knowledge. So there's no specification in what particular knowledge you search for, but principally, we are today focusing on this area of science and technology, because anyone that has ability to observe will see that the entire world today is driven towards or by science and technology. Science is becoming and technology are becoming so influential that there is nearly no domain anywhere today that you'll go to and you do not find the influence of science and technology.
Okay, I think that is a very good introduction to that topic.
Yes.
So for starters, to my viewer out there, I know we have university students, we have teachers in the staff room, we have lecturers in their, call them boardrooms or wherever they are.
Common rooms.
They are common rooms, wow. So for starters, if you were to break down for me, who is, perhaps I've studied up to primary 7, what is this science thing? Or could you kindly help us understand what is science?
What is science?
From the basics, yeah.
Now we usually conclude about science depending on whether it belongs to one of the knowledge domains that fall under either what we call the physical sciences. The principle of science is a knowledge domain driven by observation and the practical application of knowledge.
Okay.
And I think that's why we are seeing science becoming a very dominating force within today's world, in that for us in science it is about observation. Can we see? Then it also comes with practical implementation. We don't just imagine things and there's nothing to be done about it. So you'll find it appearing in what we call the physical sciences. In this case, you are talking of materials, etc., chemistry, physics. You are talking of things that are not necessarily human. Then what we call the biological sciences are the ones that deal with the living element of science, because the physical ones, we tend to influence them a lot. Out of 2 chemicals, you can create another one. So you do a lot of manipulation. But with the biologicals, we don't usually do a lot of manipulation. So that is where
practically you're saying science should involve observation.
Exactly.
There is some testing involved,
Exactly.
draw conclusions, then afterwards there is practical implementation.
Exactly.
So it has to be a two-phases kind of approach. Okay. Now, with that understanding of science having two domains of the physical and the biological,
Yes.
is there a relationship between science and religion?
That is something interesting. You realize that originally the European continent was largely governed by the church, because there was no universally acceptable force that could span across borders. So the church used to have a lot of influence. And therefore the church would also have some ideas that they considered to be part of how they define the world. Because remember, the whole concept of the Christianity that was being preached by the church starts with the Genesis. Genesis starts with the creation, meaning already the religious element had a definition of how did the world in which we are come and how does it actually behave. So meaning already the religions that existed at that time, where science started to grow more rapidly, had a definition of what they thought should be the belief of anyone regarding science.
Science, yes.
Now, scientists now begin to come up. The first one of them was Copernicus.
Religious scholars.
Then we saw Galileo Galilei. Now these ones are hardcore scientists. They are not religious men.
Okay.
Now what caused actually the final divide that separated the scientific community from the religious community was this issue of disagreeing with what is seen. Remember, we have said with the science it is observation. I can see something with my eyes.
With my eye, yes.
So these men, originally the belief was that the sun rotated around
the moon,
the earth.
The earth, yes.
Because for a resident of the earth, that's what you see. If you're a resident of earth, you can't see the earth rotating around
Surely.
the sun. You clearly see the sun moving around. So that's what they believed in from an earth level observation.
Okay.
But now these men started to peer into the sky and see. Finally, they came to the realization that actually what we are standing on is the one that is rotating around what we are seeing.
Yes.
But when they come up with these ideas, their ideas were declared to be null and void by the church in 1616. That's what we see, 1616, and that is very recent. It's not really very far off. By 1616, the ideas that the earth rotates around the sun were sent away, discarded, and declared to be heretic. Now they didn't stop there. They even launched what we call inquisitions. Inquisitions were programs where they would have to kill the non-believers. If you are still thinking that the earth is the one rotating around the sun, you have gone away from the religion and you deserve to be punished. So you can see that there was a contention between what these scientists are actually believing in and coming out of observation and what the religion was actually thinking.
Maybe if I can seek your clarification, is the discussion you're giving us to do with only the Catholic Church, or it was the held view?
Now here the Catholic Church had a lot more influence than the others, particularly on the European continent. So the contention that we saw that finally resulted into what we see as a total separation between the scientific community and the religious community started actually out of these contentions. One group is saying this, the other is saying no, we can't even observe. Because if a person pulls out his telescope and actually sees, there's no way you can tell him to abandon what he has even seen with his eyes, to follow something that he has not seen. And in the end, those people even went ahead and started to debate whether there is even existence of God and some of the others, because for them they were stuck on the idea of observation. But when we come to our Islamic system, for us we again have a totally different approach. One, the religion does not collide with anything that is clearly visible to the human eye. So you will not find any ayah anywhere that is talking of something, but the eye can see a different thing. No. On the contrary, you will find the religion supporting actually many things that even the eye cannot see, that have been only recently discovered after very advanced observative equipment like telescopes and so many other things that have been used to discover some of the things that already are embedded part of Islam. And interestingly, if you see this year 1616, the other Galileo was killed in 1564. You can see that these are people that came up well after Islam, because the message of Islam is 609, 632. It's not really, it's a big distance, but you realize that even up to that time, the very obvious things that we already know, because within Surah to Yasin, you'll find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about how the sun and the moon have courses, they rotate, meaning by that time already the Muslims were aware that the sun is not stationary, it moves and it has a course, it even follows that course as a regular thing. So meaning, although there was original contention between religion and science, especially between religion and the Christian faith at that time, we don't see that contention within the Muslim world. And actually you'll find the Muslims, due to the fact that there was really no contention, this was taken as part of the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent to us. And in the end, it became a growth factor. So you'll find so many scientists coming from within the Muslim world. And interestingly, because the Muslim empire grew well beyond Arabia, because yes, granted, the Islamic empire started from Arabia, but later it grew into other areas. But you'll find there was no limit as to where exactly we would end. And as to who was participating. For as long as you were a scholar and you had an addition to contribute, there would be no problem. You see these numbers that we are using, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to, those numbers were invented by the Muslims. Actually, if you look at the way they are referred to in English,
the Hindu Arabic,
they are called Hindu Arabic. Funny enough, the Arabs now use the Persian numbers.
Wow.
You see those numbers that that we tend to use, they were invented by Persians.
Okay. Now, thank you very much, Brother Sekalema.
Yes.
I want to apply a scientific concept here. You've told us that the Catholic Church influence is largely, if I can use the historical language, is 14th century, 1500 and the rest.
It was there well before, but these events that involve contention between scientists and...
So what then would justify the fact that Islam is revealed for the first time in 610 AD, and then the Prophet ﷺ dies 32 years later, and then Islam goes on expanding to those different empires, including the Roman Empire and the Catholic Church, as you are saying. Why then wasn't there export of the Islamic understanding of science to the Catholic Church and those
to the other areas? Now we realize that religions are built to be stable. Essentially, we don't change religious doctrine. That is the whole idea. The more fluid a religion becomes, the less stable it becomes. So its core principle now becomes too fluid to survive. Of course, within the Islamic system, we allow for fluid, but not in the mainstay of the religion. So ours is a very good religion in that it has stable areas that never change, the Tawheed, the prophets, the principles, the pillars of Islam, the pillars of Iman. These are things that do not change. But within the day-to-day life of the Muslim, that one is a fluid area. But as long as you are within the circle that has been defined by Allah, there is no limit as to how far you can move around. We don't have very rigid rules. So, meaning, even though the Islamic system could have permeated into these areas, but the religion is built to be stable, meaning
so where there are core principles,
so where the Catholic has already even punished some people for what he regards as heretic beliefs, people that are believing things that are not correct. There's no way they could change that into what they see this side as principles that have been brought by another religious force. Remember, there is competition even within the religious areas. So we don't therefore believe that they would have abandoned their core beliefs just because there's a religious factor that has come in and it takes the side of the scientists. No.
Okay.
So they continued along that path, but for us we know very well that Muslims had already invented even telescopes and so many other things that would later become the foundation of modern science.
So in other words, if we were to appreciate and thank the contribution of the earlier Muslim personalities,
exactly.
By the 14th century, a lot of innovations and developments had been done.
Yes.
Oh, mashallah. So with that background, it then tells us, do you think there is a cordial relationship between Islam and science based on the contributions of the earlier Muslim personalities you have hinted on, and do you have examples we can cite of the cordial relationship between Islam and science?
Now, the relationship between Islam and science is very clearly cordial, meaning it is a positive relationship. Why? Because we see that even within the mainstay of the Quran, because the Islamic system is built around the Quran. The Quran is the foundation from which we derive all the others. Of course, the Quran is a very summarized book in that even details of Salah, how does a Muslim pray, you don't find them in the Quran. You'll find them in the Ahadith. But of course, the Quran commands you to go to the Ahadith. وَمَا أَتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. So that becomes the principle. But within even that core, the summarized Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already put there a lot of information that is regarded as part of modern science, but it was already there in a 609, 610, up to 623 when the Prophet was receiving the message. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the very first surah,
revelation of the Prophet,
it is thus, Ba'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Iqra' bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Khalaqal insana min alaq.
That is, I see biology somewhere there.
Now you see that alaq is some kind of a clot. You can see interestingly that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say khalaqal insana min twin, which is where Adam was created
Adam
from.
was and yet this is the very first revelation.
The very
one
first
of the message.
He's not saying khalaqal insana min twin.
Because the well-known belief is that we all came from
so ultimately
clay.
Adam came out of twin, which is clay, but the majority, all the rest of the human beings were produced out of the normal reproductive process. And that one is the normal one that involves starting from a clot of blood and all the others.
Sincerely, as you're presenting it, if the very first message, Allah is Iqra, and then Allah created a clot of blood. Honestly, to a Bedouin Arab deep there in the village, it wouldn't come to their senses.
That the human being is actually created out of a clot.
Sure.
But this is what Allah reveals to us as the very first message.
Message of revelation.
That message has two significances that are relevant for our program today. One, the message is saying Iqra. That's the very first word. Read.
Seek knowledge.
The principle of looking for knowledge, reading. Wallahi, especially in today's world, a society that does not seek for knowledge cannot have any influence on the globe. Just imagine you have a small country like Singapore. Singapore is actually what we call a nation, a city-state.
City-state.
We used to have city-states in Greece like Sparta or Athens. They are not entire countries. They are just cities.
Does Vatican also fall in the same category?
I think Vatican also falls under city-states. Now, you find a city enough to become a state. But if you look at the very many things globally that small city-state called Singapore influences, you will understand that building knowledge capacity, building your capacity in science and technology, and all these things of knowledge that we are talking about will give you influence, however small you are. in terms of size. Taiwan,
I see, Taiwan.
an island state just off China. But the things that it influences, the number of things that can only be found technologically in Taiwan.
In Taiwan.
So these are the things we are talking about. So for us as Muslims, we are here to reinvigorate our spirit towards the issue of science, technology, innovation, and knowledge, because these things are part of what our forefathers appreciated and they contributed to the world of development of science. We shall see some of their contributions. So it is really very bad that today the Muslim world is largely consuming what others have built. But imagine a religious force that commands you to be sane and stable your entire life. It prohibits you from taking anything that intoxicates, be it alcohol, drugs, or it is anything that causes any departure of your mind is prohibited. Meaning a Muslim is sober the entire life for as long as they have obeyed. How can that society be again the ones that are simply consuming what others have produced? It means there's an attitude problem that we need to possibly influence. So we have seen therefore that even within the core book, the Quran, the very first message Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is embedding in there an issue that requires contemplation, a biological detail that is not visible to the human eye, because that alaq we are talking about is not some large thing.
It is us with our current advancements
that you can be able to somehow see.
Ultrasound but in the past,
you can't cut a person and you
would have to wait for the 9 months.
Exactly, in order to see this person. So those are already justifications that our religion is in tandem with this entire issue of science and technology. And from day one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought a message that will continue to be relevant for the whole of our time. Because as we go forward, science and technology will just continue to influence our lives. We expect that in the future, people are even going to build robots that mimic the behavior of a human being.
Actually, we already have examples. I'm told they've already made a female, is it a female robot?
There is a small robot called Sophia. It is able to talk with a human being, and it asks you questions and smiles. And so those ones are still really prototypes. The destination is full-scale androids, something that you can look at and you cannot differentiate between yourself and that. Now imagine a robot that is able to sit in the doctor's chair and grab your hand and it tells you, you are having A, B, C, and D anomalies, you don't take enough sugar, it looks like you are sleeping less. Just because it has sensors here and it is able to scan your body. Actually, this is where we are heading.
I should even tell you that, you know, with social media, they shared a video where somebody's phone made a notification. It said, excuse me sir, do you know you've not taken sugar, I need water for the past 3 days. Then you've not visited your physician for the past 5 days. So I was asked, how did you know this? And said, within the phone they had put there an application that could track
whether you are taking water or it is. So that one is an app, but here we are talking of a human-like machine, an android, and it is able to do all of these things. Meaning the future is just going to become more and more technology, more and more scientific. And if we are going to be relevant as a society, then we need to interest ourselves in this area of knowledge, look at what are the deficiencies that are preventing us from participating effectively, and we should be able to participate. Already our forefathers did participate and they made major contributions.
So the Islam and science being cordially related, you've started by telling us that even the very first revelation contained a message of science. So are there other cases where we can see that science and Islam are really cordial?
Cordial, yes. Now you'll find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us information about how the rain forms, and he explains in detail how the clouds come together, they create a very large cloud like a mountain, then the mountain cools. So these are all things that are already in the Quran, and they are explained in detail. Then the part of embryo development, I think it is Surah Al-Mu'minun. I am not very sure of the ayah. We can always look it up. The good thing we can meet over. In that ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now goes into the detail. Remember, he was saying, khalaqal insana min alaq. Now, when it comes to Surah Al-Mu'minun, where he goes ahead and now explains the process of embryo development. Now, this person here, the human being, is created out of that alaq.
That alaq, yes.
Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes ahead and explains the other stages. How halakal, from the alaq, he goes to mudaga. From mudaga, he goes to idham, which are the bones. And from idham, he goes to dressing the idham or the
he dresses it with the flesh.
Now, one interesting thing about that particular ayah, the ayah says, out of the mudghah, which is some kind of congealed blood, Allah says he creates the bones. Now, the original idea from the scientists was that when a human being is created, this human being is flesh.
Flesh.
Then the bones grow within the flesh, because they could not imagine that our entire structure starts with bones. So for them, they thought, there's this big flesh, then inside that flesh, the bones grow and they create this structure. But the Quran was saying he creates the bones.
The bones. And
then fakasauna, we dress the bones
with the
flesh. So they later went back and rethought, why is this book saying bones, then flesh? Because remember, for many years, the anatomy people studied and taught one another that you have this flesh, then the bones grow from inside. Now, logically, it's not even possible to construct a structure by starting with the roof, then you slowly put in the pillars. You see, the thing is very illogical. But for them, they could not imagine that that's the way. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had already given a very detailed and accurate account. And in the end, they altered their books in order to reflect what they actually discovered. So the human being starts by becoming bone, meaning the core structure. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes and dresses that core structure with the rest of the flesh, and finally the body is built in it. So if the book, the Quran, which is our founding source of knowledge, is giving us this particular detail, then we simply have no disagreement between science and Islam. Okay. The only disagreement that we may have may arise from what we may call pseudoscience.
Perhaps now, that will be our last
now what aspect. We call pseudoscience are things that are claimed to be science, but they don't even fulfill some of the requirements. Remember, we said that because of disagreement between the religious group and the scientists, the scientists broke away and became atheists.
Wow.
So the atheist is the person that disagrees with the whole idea that there is a God. So for them, they insist this entire world in which we live is just coming out of an accidental explosion that created all this. Of course, you can see that even from...
Actually, we call it nature.
So because they can't, you can't really talk of that idea. It does not fit into the human brain. They created some element called nature. But remember, nature is not an intelligent object. It can't make a decision. It can't design. So in order to justify for the atheists something that can keep them going, they started to come up with some ideas that depart from religion. Meaning, if the religious people are saying human beings were created by God, if you remove this God, it means you have to find how did they come into this world.
Actually, there is a question I always find interesting when they ask you between an egg and a hen, which came before the other?
Of course, it was the hen. Because for us, we know that Adam was a fool at the time of his creation. He didn't start with the alaq.
Wow.
He was a fool. Then out of him now we started generating these other copies. So meaning even for the chicken, you start with the full one, then you generate the copies via eggs. So
but some people honest, they would say, but where does the egg then come from?
No, it starts because creation is the principle from religion.
Meaning by that, if you are to go with your answer, then it means if you put God in the equation, he's the one who places Adam.
Exactly.
Now for the pseudoscience, as you're saying, take away God, now the answer will be who put there.
So what they do, they come up with some imaginary ideas about how chemicals mixed one and two, then they created the first forms of life. They claim we started as a single cellular animals, then later we grew into more complex ones, but then for us now we came out of chimpanzees and the others. And these ideas don't qualify to be called scientific ideas. They don't simply being that they don't have any evidence on the basis of observation. If you have decided to become a scientist, you have to go fully into science. You make a declaration, please provide solid evidence for it. Now, they claim to have provided evidence. They can show you some animal that looks somehow like a snake and as if like a fish. Then they tell you, now you see, that animal shows that snakes came from fish. Now, the fish themselves are in billions of species. Just sharks, there are 5,000 forms of sharks.
Wow.
So meaning if you're going to bring evidence that this shark came out of some other creature, you'll need like 1 million intermediate forms. And all this evidence is not there, but they come up with this evidence. So for us in Islam, we shall disagree with that kind of science because it's not even fulfilling all the requirements of science. And unfortunately, it is being peddled just to support the atheistic understanding. But for us, we know very well that there is no disagreement between science, because science is simply a study of what Allah has created, and what he has created he has explained to us and given us a chance to go and explore. The purpose of the exploration is to build iman, because we see Allah in whatever he has created.
Thank you very much, Brother Sekalema Hamza. Our viewers, we could say more than that, but you know, this time is a constraint, and we really need to maximally use our time. But inshallah, we shall be here every Monday to continue with this topic. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Sekalema Hamza. He's a lecturer at the Islamic University in Uganda and a computer scientist. So today we are largely into science, but his main expertise field is technology, which is computer science largely. But today being the first segment, we hope to give a background and relationship between Islam and science, among other issues that we've talked. I want to thank you very much for being a good audience. We shall appreciate your feedback and comments in the different social media platforms that we have at our disposal. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Eno ye Salam TV.